I was married to my ex-husband, Alan, until just 4 months ago. Our marriage came crashing down when I caught him red-handed with another woman. At the time, I was pregnant and had been staying at my mom's place for about a week. I thought it would be nice to surprise Alan by coming home early. My plan was to make him breakfast before work, something sweet to show him I cared, especially since he'd been telling me how much he missed me. But the second I walked through that door, everything I believed about my marriage shattered. I didn't find him waiting for me. I found him in our bed, and he wasn't alone. There was another woman lying there with him. I screamed so loud I'm sure half the neighborhood heard me. My whole body froze in shock, because I couldn't wrap my head around what I was seeing. Alan, panicked, scrambled to apologize. He kept stammering excuses, but instead of owning what he had done, he twisted it on me. He said I should have called first before coming home, that it was my fault for showing up early. Imagine that, he was blaming me for catching him in the act. I was furious and heartbroken all at once. I demanded to know who this woman was, but Alan kept dodging the question, saying it didn't matter and that we could talk later. But there was no later. Not after this. What cut even deeper was the way she looked at me. Her face carried no shame, no hint of guilt. She sat there like she had every right to be in my home. The coldness in her eyes made it clear this wasn't her first time in my bed. When I asked if she and Alan were having an affair, she didn't even flinch. She nodded, bold as ever, like it was nothing to be ashamed of. Alan tried to hush me, telling me to ignore her, swearing he'd explain later. She, on the other hand, smirked, scoffed at him, and calmly started putting on her clothes. That's when my stomach dropped. I realized she wasn't wearing just anything. She was wearing my red nightdress. I felt sick. Who does that? Who puts on another woman's clothes while sleeping with her husband? My anger boiled over. I shouted at her to take it off, my voice trembling with rage. I demanded to know what the hell she was thinking, parading around in my clothes after what she had just done. She shrugged like it was no big deal, saying she didn't pack anything for the night and went through my closet. Then, with a cruel grin, she pointed at my belly and sneered, "It's not like you can fit into this anymore." At that moment, I saw red. Who was this woman to come into my home, sleep with my husband, and insult me on top of it? Before I even knew what I was doing, I lunged at her. I grabbed her by the hair and yanked hard. She screamed and thrashed, but I was taller and stronger, and she couldn't break free. If I hadn't been pregnant, I swear I would have thrown her to the ground and made her regret ever stepping foot in my house. But my baby came first, and I had to hold myself back. Alan jumped in and pulled us apart. Still, she wasn't afraid. With fire in her eyes, she shouted that she'd kill me for touching her hair. She even dared Alan to defend her, saying if he didn't, he'd lose her forever. She spoke to him like she had a claim on him, like she was the one with authority. And that's when it finally clicked, she wasn't just some random fling. This wasn't a one-time mistake. She was more than that to him. What hurt most was Alan's reaction. Instead of standing with me, he turned on me. He actually scolded me for slapping her, told me I needed to calm down and act rational. Rational? He was the one cheating, yet somehow I was the problem. I asked him directly who she was and what exactly was going on. That's when he dropped the truth like a bomb. He said that ever since I got pregnant, he had felt less and less attracted to me. As if carrying his child somehow made me less worthy. He admitted that he'd met this woman, her name was Lila, and that she gave him something I couldn't. His words cut deeper than any knife. He explained that what started as casual hookups had turned into something more serious. He even had the nerve to say he was planning to tell me, but wanted to wait until after the baby was born because he thought that would spare me pain. As though betraying me while I was pregnant was an act of mercy. 4 years of marriage, 4 years of me standing by him through every struggle and every dream, and this was my reward. My husband sneaking around with Lila and telling me it was because he wasn't attracted to me anymore. My anger and heartbreak collided into something unbearable. I told him flat out there was no need to wait until after the baby. If he was so sure he didn't love me anymore, then he needed to leave now. No more dragging it out, no more excuses. He tried to argue, but I was finished listening. I told him to pack up his things and take Lila with him. The audacity of him bringing her into my house, into my bed, was more than I could ever forgive. Even if he didn't love me anymore, how dare he disrespect me like this? Alan looked stunned, like he never expected me to stand up for myself. He tried to push back, but I made it clear if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. I wasn't going to let either of them stay in my home a second longer. Eventually, he gave in and started packing. As they were walking out, Lila had one last insult to throw. She mocked me, saying Alan had told her all along that I was cold and calculating. She sneered that no man could ever really stay with me. Her words stung like salt in an open wound. And the worst part? Alan said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't apologize, didn't even look back. The second that door shut, I broke. The weight of everything, betrayal, humiliation, loss, crashed down on me. I sobbed harder than I ever had in my life. But through the tears, a small voice inside reminded me who I was. I had been raised by a single mother, a strong woman who taught me never to let anyone break me. And as shattered as I felt in that moment, I knew I couldn't let Alan or anyone else take away my worth. I wiped my tears, stood up, and told myself I would survive this. In the weeks that followed, I wasted no time. I reached out to a lawyer, got proper legal advice, and officially filed for divorce. Thankfully, I'd been wise enough years earlier to insist on a prenup before Alan and I got married. That one decision made the entire process much smoother, since I was financially in a stronger position than he was. The divorce wasn't going to be a long or messy fight. The only major issue we needed to work out was custody of our baby. As the mother, I was granted primary custody right away. Alan would only get supervised visits, at least until our child was older and we could revisit the arrangement. Given what he'd done, I couldn't bring myself to trust him alone with our newborn, and my lawyer made it clear that this was in the child's best interest. Alan reluctantly agreed, and the terms were set. Then, just 4 days ago, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The whole experience was overwhelming, exhausting, and emotional, but I was grateful my mom stayed by my side the entire time. Her presence gave me the strength and comfort I needed to get through labor. I was still in the hospital recovering when Alan came to visit me and the baby the next day. To my surprise, he actually looked proud to be a father. And despite all my anger toward him, I still wanted us to at least try to be decent co-parents. Whatever had happened between us, our son was the most important thing now. After a while, my mom went home to rest. She had been awake with me for hours and looked completely drained. I was exhausted too, both physically and emotionally, and desperately needed to sleep. Alan promised he would stay in the room and watch our baby so I could rest. I reminded him to wake me if the baby cried, since I needed to feed him, and he nodded, assuring me he would. So imagine the terror I felt when I woke up 3 hours later to my mom shaking me awake and demanding, "Where's the baby?" I shot up, confused and disoriented. The crib was empty. My son and Alan were gone. My heart dropped into my stomach, and panic surged through me. We checked the room, the hallways, everywhere, but they were nowhere to be found. I rushed to the nurse's station, frantically asking if anyone had seen Alan or my child. One nurse hesitated before telling me she had spotted Alan leaving the hospital, cradling my baby in his arms. Her words hit me like a freight train. Alan had walked out with our newborn, without my permission, without a word. He had no right. My mind spun out of control as fear took over. I grabbed my phone and started calling him again and again, but every call went unanswered. Each silence on the other end pushed me closer to a full-blown panic attack. Where did he take my baby? What if my son was crying and hungry? What if Alan planned to disappear with him? My thoughts spiraled into worst-case scenarios, each one scarier than the last. Finally, after countless tries, someone answered. But it wasn't Alan, it was Lila. Her voice on the line made my blood run cold. She told me, almost casually, that my baby was with her. Alan had apparently taken him to their place so she could meet the newborn, since I had refused to let her visit me at the hospital. That was true, I had told Alan no when he asked. I didn't want that woman anywhere near me or my child. I tried to stay calm and asked how my son was. Lila explained that the baby had woken up crying, clearly hungry, so Alan had rushed out to buy formula, leaving the baby with her. Then she added that he'd forgotten his phone, which was why she was the one answering my call. My head spun. My newborn was hungry, crying, and in the care of the woman who destroyed my marriage. And she wanted me to wait until they were done feeding him? The audacity was unbelievable. I demanded she return him to the hospital immediately so I could feed him, but Lila dismissed me like I was overreacting. She said she and Alan were going to be my son's parents too, along with me, and that they knew what was best for him. Her tone was icy, almost deranged. She insisted I calm down, saying Alan would bring the baby back once he'd eaten. She even bragged that they'd read parenting books, so they were prepared to care for my child without me. Hearing that only fueled my rage. I hung up on her and immediately dialed the police. Through tears and shaking hands, I reported that my ex-husband had kidnapped my newborn and left him with a stranger. I told them how terrified I was, especially since I had given birth just 1 day earlier. My worst fear was that something could happen to my baby, that he was scared or hurt without me. The police moved quickly. Within an hour, Alan and Lila were arrested for kidnapping and endangering my child. When the officers brought my son back to me, I rushed to feed him and change him. He was safe, but his tiny face was red and puffy from crying for so long. Seeing him like that broke me. The whole ordeal was a nightmare, but at least he was back where he belonged, with me. Since then, Alan and Lila have been released on bail, but they're both facing charges and will have to appear in court. I've made it clear I will not be dropping the charges. This wasn't some small mistake, my child's safety was on the line, and they needed to be held accountable. At first, Alan tried to downplay it all. He said I was overreacting, that he hadn't done anything wrong, and that calling the police was unnecessary. He claimed he just wanted to show off our son. He had no concept of how serious it was. But after speaking with his lawyer, his attitude shifted. Now he's begging me to reconsider, saying he might go to jail and pleading for forgiveness. But here's the truth, I can't forgive him for this. I honestly don't know what he and Lila were thinking. When we divorced, I hoped we could at least manage to be civil and supportive co-parents. But taking my newborn without permission? That's unforgivable. He had no right. He didn't have custody. And the fact that he would steal my baby away from me without caring how it affected either of us proves he doesn't respect me at all as his child's mother. For me, this was never just about custody. It was about basic decency and responsibility as a parent. Alan didn't have the right to make decisions about our newborn without consulting me, especially when our son was only a day old. I've seen people question why I involved the police, and honestly, it makes me wonder if some of them truly understand what being a parent, particularly a mother, means. When you have a newborn, you can't just separate that baby from their mother right after birth. Infants need constant care, feeding, changing, holding, around the clock. When my son was finally returned to me, he was crying, his diaper hadn't been changed, and he was hungry. My heart broke seeing him like that. No one, not Alan, not Lila, had the right to put him in that situation. As his mother, I had to do what was necessary to protect him, and in that moment, calling the police was the only way to guarantee my baby was brought back to me quickly and safely. And what gave them the right to decide he needed formula? That was not their choice to make. It was mine, as his mother. Even worse, Alan left my baby in the hands of a woman I barely knew, someone I only knew because I had caught her in bed with him. What if something had happened? What if she hurt him? The thought still chills me. So no, I don't regret calling the cops. Not for 1 second. What they did was reckless and dangerous, and I refuse to brush it aside. My baby is safe now, and I'm grateful, but Alan and Lila will be held accountable. My son is my priority, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect him even when it means making hard choices. Update 2, it's been a week since that nightmare, and thankfully, my son and I are home and doing well. My mom has been staying with us to help, and I've even installed cameras all over the house. I'm not taking any chances with his safety. Alan has been begging me to drop the charges, terrified of jail time, but I'd ignored him. That didn't stop him from showing up unannounced at my house the other day. He looked desperate, practically shaking, but I refused to let him inside. I stepped out on the porch instead, keeping the door shut with my son sleeping peacefully inside. Alan ranted about how, as the father, he had every right to take our son wherever he wanted. He accused me of being controlling, told me I was acting like a bitter ex-wife, and demanded I tell the police it was all a misunderstanding. Then, in the most condescending tone, he looked me in the eye and said, "This is exactly why I couldn't be with you anymore. You're controlling. You suffocate everything. That's why I cheated." His words stung, but I refused to let him twist this around. He tried to paint himself as the victim, claiming I'd driven him away and made him feel trapped. I stood firm. I told him I wasn't falling for his manipulation anymore. I reminded him that he was the one who cheated, Hugh was the one who lied, and he destroyed our marriage. This wasn't about us, it was about our son. He had no right to take a one-day-old baby to his girlfriend while I was recovering in a hospital bed. I told him flat out that I wasn't dropping the charges. Being a father is about actions, not just biology, and his actions proved he was immature, reckless, and unfit to make decisions for our child. Then I shut the door in his face while he kept shouting from outside. As for Lila, she didn't stay quiet either. She's been sending me vile, unhinged messages non-stop. She claimed she wanted to be my son's new mommy, accused me of being jealous because she won Alan, and even wrote that she wished me and my son would die in a car accident. The sheer cruelty of those words stunned me. What kind of person wishes death on a newborn? She's truly twisted. I've saved every single message and handed them to my lawyer. We're now pursuing a restraining order against her. It's obvious she's unstable, and I won't risk her being anywhere near me or my son again. Update 3, a month and a half later, the court date finally arrived. Both Alan and Lila showed up with their lawyers, trying to spin excuses and minimize what happened. Alan claimed he was just trying to be a good father and that he planned to return the baby later. He even tried to blame me, saying my hormones made me overreact. Lila went as far as to argue that she had every right to be part of my son's life, acting as if she was already a stepmother. But the truth was plain. Alan had taken my baby without permission, left him in Lila's care, and ignored my rights as his mother. There was no excuse. My lawyer read out Lila's threatening messages in court, one by one, exposing her for who she really was. The courtroom went silent, the disgust on people's faces said it all. The judge didn't hesitate. Alan was found guilty of kidnapping and endangering a child. His sentence included a year of probation and mandatory parenting classes, with the warning that any violation would land him in jail. Lila was hit with a restraining order that keeps her permanently away from me and my son. On top of that, both of them were ordered to pay restitution for the emotional harm they caused. I watched them seethe with rage as the ruling was delivered, but there was nothing they could do. Justice had been served. Update 4: 6 months have passed since that day in court, and life finally feels normal again. My baby boy is 6 months old now, and every milestone fills me with joy. His first smile, the first time he rolled over, now almost sitting up by himself. Every little moment reminds me why I fought so hard to protect him. My mom continues to be a rock for me, helping with night feedings and giving me the emotional support I've needed more than ever. I honestly don't know how I would have managed without her. As for Alan and Lila, they've disappeared from our lives. Alan has tried reaching out a few times, but I've ignored him. I'm done with him. I've made it clear we're moving forward without him, and that's exactly what we're doing. Lila hasn't dared to contact me again, thanks to the restraining order. There are moments when the anger and betrayal resurface, when I think about everything they put me through. But I don't let those feelings consume me. What matters now is my son, the life we're building together, and the peace we've finally found.